We've created a series of shows called Bonne Aventure, which means the French word good fortune. And the reason why we did this is because each time that we're traveling to different locations, we're sending positive intentions to the planet and to share some of the ideas that we have regarding our trip. So to go a little deeper, take a look at part 1 of Bonne Aventure, at least listen to the intro, and have an idea about what this is going to discuss and what happens. Of course, each trip is unique, and we encourage you to just sit back and enjoy, listen, and then add your comments at the end. And good fortune to you as well. I was invited to a wedding in Scottsdale, Arizona. Sometimes we do things for love. We travel far, climb high, and spend money we don't have to visit an event, person, or a vision that eclipses all other responsibilities. It started off very difficult at first. As soon as I arrived in the airport, it seemed people were not very welcoming. Maybe I was just a fish out of water, and none of this was making sense to me. I soon discovered I had lost my phone on the plane. No one could help me other than a woman who shared the internet, and I connected to friends from the wedding. No phone, no contacts, no navigation. I then needed to rent a car with navigation and find the Airbnb I was headed to. I finally made my way there, got onto the internet, and was able to report my phone was missing from the airport. The first night at the Airbnb felt like a MyLab. Things were not going well. But with a little rest, I found a local T-Mobile, got a new phone, and I was back in action. From there, I said goodbye to the weird Airbnb and set off for a hotel stay close to the venue. Things began to look up. With a little help from my friends, I was back on track, enjoying the festivities at a beautiful golf course, and then later on, after a few days, met up with Team Tasmania, and we were on the road. Getting back to love. We do things for love that we would never do otherwise. We get up at ungodly hours and go to sleep at ungodly hours just to make sure things are safe for those who love us. We find romance and a spark ignites within us, and it is all worth it in the end. Did you ever see Arizona skies at sunset? It is like the dawn and the dusk at the same time. It is like echoes down a corridor in a burnished glow of earth, painted mountains. Someone in love made this place. I suppose I could say that about many beautiful natural places in the earth, but today I am enamored by the Southwest. I thought, if I feel this way, imagine the many generations of First Nation people singing to the sky gods, flying with the birds and stomping on the red earth. They infused this land with love. I know. It wasn't always peaceful here, but this is what makes Arizona timeless, with wild abandonment, untouched in many ways. So I'm in Arizona right now, and I came here for a personal reason, but it turned out to be something else, and some really weird things happening regarding going through the airport, and I had an incident where I lost something that was critical, and so it really set the stage for something else. We're going to be doing some travel here and looking at some of the sacred sites, but I'm not really sure what kind of challenges that we're going to be up against, but
anyhow, take a look. I mean, this is a pretty interesting place. I don't know why, but when I was driving around, I kind of remember what it was like to be in Iceland. And they have these type of mountains here. There's kind of not a lot of greenery and growth, but I saw an interesting parallel. But take a look at the landscape.
After being with Team Tasmania, we decided that we wanted to grab a little something to eat. And we went to this great place called La Grande Orange Grocery. And it had a lot of organic type of food, and it just looked really healthy and fun. And I ended up buying a little cup from there just to remind myself of the trip. And inside the cup, it says, "Live the life you've imagined," by Thoreau. Was a quote. And so I guess this is how the trip is going. It started to take an upturn and become a little bit more positive, and I became more inquisitive as to why I felt a little bit uncomfortable at first, but it seems to level off, and here we go, traveling along and heading towards Sedona after our meal. And we stopped at a few different locations on the way just to take a break, see what was going on. And of course, I had to try on a cowboy hat and some boots at a local shop. And then I forgot I was close to Halloween, and we saw someone that looked like Dorothy in the Tin Man. And it was kind of iconic. I kept thinking, well, we're not in Kansas anymore. Well, of course not. Not that we were in Kansas in the first place, but, it's just definitely a feeling of being transported. So we ended up going to this other place it was like a mall area, and there was one store that was obviously alien themed, and it had little inflated or like statues of aliens. And so, of course, I took a picture of it. And in another mall, we found this place called like a K-pop store, which I'd never seen before. And also there was a salon there called The Lab, a beauty salon, which was really weird to me. But then I started looking around, and there was a Korean bakery that had French named desserts, croissants and all sorts of like French pastries and things. But it was all from Korea. And we purchased a few of those. And then as we were traveling, we ended up finding this place called Cafe Monarch. And I said, okay, so now this is starting to make sense to me. And we thought we would pull over. It didn't look like hardly anyone was around. We didn't see anyone in the parking lot. So we decided to go inside. The door happened to be open, but the restaurant was not open at the time. So we walked around, and as you can see, there's some of these different pictures of what it looked like on the inside. So my feeling of things being slightly out of place, it reminded me that Monarch Solutions obviously had a presence in this location. And so started to be cautious about everything, and started to be aware that there was definitely MyLab activity happening, which would explain the hotel that I stayed in, and as well as this beauty salon called The Lab, and then finding this Cafe Monarch. And so, and then there were other indications as well, but, different regions of the US and other nations, you can tell right away when you're going into one of those hot locations where there's a lot of activity happening from the corporations. And this was definitely one of them. On our road traveling to Sedona, I had a lot of thoughts that crossed my mind, maybe picking up the energy of everything around me. I also felt like there was a rhythm in the car, kind of the way the wheels turn and spin on the road. You start to hear a rhythm in the sound of driving. And so I started thinking about some of the songs that I thought were connected to Arizona. One song is by a band called Phoenix, 1901. But then I found out that they're actually from Versailles, France, and that they sang that song because they thought in 1901 it was a better year. I also thought about another song called Sedona by Houndsmouth, and it kind of does a tribute to Hollywood, and I could see that there were probably many movies that were made in this area that I see as familiar, but there's nothing like actually being here. So I'm thinking about these songs, the tunes come to my head, and then I started thinking about all the people that came out west, maybe to find a dream, to make money, to mine for gold or silver, to climb the mountains, to be a vigilante, to become famous, to find a new home, to change their name, to live off the land, to be a part of the Old West, the New West, the undamaged landscape, the lack of any type of pollution, the breathtaking beauty, and the never-ending thirst for water that I felt. I also thought about all the spiritual seekers who came out here to meditate, to travel, to do workshops, to connect to the ancient spiritual connections that was already here in the First Nations people. So many ideas, feelings, expressions streamed through my mind. And of course, just the music as we float on by until we get up to the location we were searching for. But when we got to Sedona, it was very different from what I thought it would feel like. But not in a bad way at all. It was magnificent. It almost felt like we were surrounded by mountains and like held onto or hugged in a way by this beautiful, strong, bold energy.
We're in Sedona right now, the land of the Red Rock, and just taking in this beautiful sight. It's really amazing. But we were guided to travel to here for probably numerous reasons. Here again, for helping the planet and seeing what can transpire as we open up and see what's going on in our nation.
And then we spent some time, got a little something to eat, and then after that we found this very strange statue. I suppose some people would say it was really beautiful, but there was something that was a bit unnerving about it. I know that people might be upset about my comments regarding it, but it's a female. I don't know if they were trying to do an angelic look to it, but then you see the earth is split in two, and then it started to feel really uncomfortable. They also called it the caduceus, and I thought about Mercury. I thought about the staff of Mercury, the medical symbol. I had mixed feelings about it, I'll be honest with you. It didn't feel really good. And to those that really thought it was an image of femininity or something divine, I don't know. I was just looking at the symbology, as I said. But anyhow, moving on to the next location. So our next stop is Williams, Arizona. And Williams, Arizona is quite significant. It's past Flagstaff, but something that Williams has, and of course it was founded in 1881. The thing that it had was a train, and the uniqueness of the train was to actually, travel into the Grand Canyon without a vehicle. And so you just enjoy the trip there, almost start to get into the mode of the Old West. As we're looking around, I notice that there's a little downtown area, and we just take advantage of that. We go in the train station, we purchase our tickets, and then start walking around this town. And they have this really nice, nostalgic type of like restaurant and kind of like the old-fashioned way of doing things. There was a lot of memorabilia. There was this really cool store. And of course, we found Elvis there and so many others that kind of created the feeling of Americana. I guess that's what they call it. So if you want to feel and see what America was like and has been like, often shown in some of the great movies, and this is it. And so we decided to stay in Williams that night. We slept over, and then the next morning we went to the train station. And we were excited about it because the train station, they did this really interesting, like unexpected Wild West show. It was mostly, actors having fun, talking like cowboys, talking like robbers, kind of the Jesse James theme, and just shooting at each other and going through some kind of narrative, bringing the audience in. It was just, a little extra something, but this is what I remember as a kid, these type of things that seem to be fading away. And I really wish that the other generations could experience it, just because it was a time where you can experience freedom. Obviously, you can legally have a gun, but it was that sort of adventurous, carefree experience of enjoying life and being here in the moment, enjoying nature, and not really feeling oppressed by a lot of like psychological, mentally taxing issues, no huge financial burdens. You just you're living your life, you're enjoying your life, you're savoring your life, something that we don't get to do enough. So we took advantage of the situation and, took the train right in, watched the show, and this is what happened.
Watch out, they're gonna rob you. They're looking for McDonald's money. Well, you guys are on your own.
fucking tell you, we're robbing you right now. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Golden bills, give them money
right there.
there.
Oh,
No,
yeah.
there's no money in there.
Money
So-
needs to get out of jail.
No, by the
Oh,
way, I'm Jesse James.
You're Jesse James?
You don't want to rob
I
me.
robbed more trains than Jesse James.
No, you
So is
didn't.
he. So is everyone in the whole crew. He robbed a total around 16.
Yeah? How
I'm
many
at
did
like
you rob?
120 right now.
Well, I bet you
Yeah.
will.
Sorry, Jesse. Sorry. But
All right.
no. All right, folks.
Just don't shoot
Jesse,
me in the
have fun so
back.
you don't find us.
During our travel on the train heading from Williams, Arizona, over to the Grand Canyon, there was a lot of time for them to share stories, to talk to the people that were sitting in the cabins. And one of the stories that they brought up is this legend of G.E. Kincaid and S.A. Jordan, and both of them having descriptions about an underground city, the evidence of Egyptians being there, and so many other pieces of detail regarding how he went into this underground cavern system, and that there were mummies and there were all sorts of different artifacts, even some Hindu artifacts and so forth. So of course they said the individual, particularly G.E. Kincaid, was never discovered. It's almost like he provided the story, then he disappeared. And if I reflect on that, how many times have people come out and disclosed information and then mysteriously disappear and we never hear from them again? So that piqued my interest. It wasn't anything that I was looking for, but I thought, well, this is something that they talk about on the train, whether they call it a legend or not. Maybe it's something to add interest to the ride. But in a way, it felt like they had a lot of passion in the story, almost like they knew that there was more to it, but couldn't really say that there was more to it, particularly because the authorities, so-called, Smithsonian, said that it was unfounded. And then, of course, with further research, I started discovering some other pieces of information, listening to what others had something to say about it. Teddy Roosevelt was interested in the area. You know, the native people, the Hopi, the Navajo, the Zuni, the Apache, were well aware of the area. They talked about reptilian groups. They talked about ant people. They talked about giants. And, you know, it's almost as if they want to discard all of that information, that history that belongs to the world. It doesn't just belong to them. And some have even said how there were, artifacts regarding giants, skeletal structures over 7 feet tall, and then they're missing. As I'm looking at it, it made more and more sense. And also the fact, I guess, you know, if you name everything Egyptian, such as like the different regions, as soon as you get to the Grand Canyon, you see these different regions called the Isis Temple, the Tower of Set, Horus, the Cheops Pyramid, Ra, the Manu Temple, the Krishna Temple, Shiva Temple, and the Buddha Temple. All of these different locations, I mean, it sounds like it's Egyptian, it sounds like it's ancient Hindu, and also Buddhist. So why would all of that information be there? Well, during the story, when G.E. Kincaid was explaining everything in this article from 1909, it was a news article, and this is what I'm bringing you to, this is something that talks about the news article. I'll let you read it. I didn't want to read all of the other comments stating that none of this was true. I'd like you to read some of the information that is a fact and why the park has all of these Egyptian names. One of the things that Kincaid said is that they blocked off the area and the government took over, and some people have also hinted that, you know, the black helicopters would show up and obviously intimidate anyone from going beyond, a certain area that was off limits to the public. So if there was nothing to hide, why would that area be off limits? And is it just the artifacts? Because if it was the artifacts, that is something that they could easily have, taken and shown in some kind of museum. But what I believe is there's the underground civilization and the tunnel system that they didn't want people to get access to. And in a way, I can understand that it would be very dangerous for people going down there to find out what the government probably knows is these other extraterrestrials that are living there that they don't want to disclose. I know it sounds frustrating, but it isn't. We could take their information, we could research on our own, and continue doing so, archiving, editing, reviewing, collaborating information until we get what it is that we're looking for. And that's what we do here. Open-minded. I think we always be open-minded that some of the information is an impartial truth or not, or maybe it's disinformation completely. That's something that we need to discover. If we really want to understand what's going on in the world, we need to be patient. We need to not go crazy because someone has a few facts that aren't accurate. They just need to be caught up to speed, and then not necessarily trust the supposed reputable sources, because they also have other motives. And of course, we know there are reasons why governments do not disclose certain things, particularly around extraterrestrials. They don't want humanity to know, and they don't want this to be wide open. And there are probably other threats and agreements that they have with them. And so these are the things that we've been left out of. But at the ACIO, we have more access to that information if we need to dig in a little further. Speaking of the ACIO, as soon as I got to the Grand Canyon, Peter called. And I thought, great, here I have traveled halfway across the country to see the Grand Canyon, and now I have to take care of business. And apparently there was a problem. And this has happened before, where I'd been at a certain location and then Peter would show up. Something else that came to mind while I was talking to him and I'm looking over the edge, it brought back a memory that I had when I was over at the Badlands. And I remember standing on the edge of the Badlands and even wanted to go out as far as possible to look down into it. And I had this overwhelming urge to jump in. But I was never suicidal. That wasn't the issue. There is some kind of energy in these places that are they draw you in a way that's sort of unnatural. And I do want to warn people about this phenomena. I don't really know what it's called, but according to the history of the Grand Canyon, this has happened more than once. They say that people get dizzy, or they think that they're fine. They go to the edge to take a better picture. Maybe they want something to share on Facebook, and it turns out to be fatal. Whereas they go to stand up, they lose balance, and then they fall over. So there's some kind of natural energy there that draws you in to a location of this nature. I don't know what it is. I do know that it's an overwhelming beauty, and you just stand there and look at it, and it's very mesmerizing. I just think that people should be wary or careful in looking at something like that. But there is a power in those locations. It almost looks like a meteor had hit it in the center. All of these mineral deposits, just they create these layering that goes up and down in the canyon in this beautiful red color. The Badlands had, silver and green and gold, and just it was really amazing to look at. But either way, it's an incredible energy. If there is something else there, I would believe it immediately just by the energy that's there. I don't know how many people go and visit there per year, but it is, like I said, breathtaking and worth doing at least once in your lifetime. And I'm glad that I was able to do that. I hope to return someday. And I hope at some point the truth comes out about what exists there, that there is peace for the people, the First Nations people in the area in the process. Our next stop is the Four Corners region. On our travel up there, it was almost as if we were in no man's land, essentially untouched by humanity, driving on these highways, going around these somewhat rolling hills of spotted grasses and almost sand-like or very, very desolate kind of land, but yet beautiful at the same time. And I said to my friends, this place looks like we'd be in trouble if anything happened to our car right now. I'm not sure how often people actually come by here. So you really need to be prepared if you're going to go to this location or travel up from the Grand Canyon. But once we got there, it's almost like a specific area that is closed off by flags, and there's like these little flags showing this region that is the central point between Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, and Arizona. This is the land of the ancient pueblos, and this is a land where quite often all of these groups come in together, whether they're different bands of tribes or groups that come and celebrate. They do ceremonies, they do certain types of activities, holding on to this land that is dedicated to them. But they do open it up to the public for people to come and visit. And we're going to talk more about this because the site is quite interesting, even though it's simplistic. And then it goes further into the idea, the concept of the meaning of the four directions and how important that is to the Native American culture.
Hello, I am here in front of the Four Corners, which is an intersection of New Mexico, Colorado, Arizona, and Utah. And I'm just going to do a quick...
Oh, mine aren't going to be quick. Mine are going to be
Yeah. Okay, and you can see everything right there. I decided to come here because we were in the area, of course, but it was sort of planned out that we would be able to take a look at everything that's going on here and have our positive intentions for the planet, what's going on around us. There's so much lack of peace, people sending out unhealthy problems on the planet, diseases, warfare, hatred, dissension between the races and the cultures. That's not the way it was meant to be. We have a higher purpose than that. And anyone that doesn't see that higher purpose, they just see one culture, is in a tunnel. They don't see it all. They don't know that the balance of all is what is creation. It's like the eagle saying that they don't like the dove. It is like the insects, eliminating the insects, which creates a problem with the ecosystem. All these different things work together. The water works with the air works with the earth. Everything works together. We all must work together to be, not just to be one, but to be in balance.
They usually use the four colors of black, red, yellow, and white. The black is to the west, and the sun sets and the day ends. The north, it brings in the cold, harsh winds of the winter season, These winds are cleansing. The east is the yellow, the directions from which the sun comes. The light dawns in the morning and spreads over the earth. And the south is, because the southern sky is when the sun is at its highest, this direction stands for warmth and growing. The sun's rays are powerful in drawing life from the earth. And it is said, the life of all things comes from the south. All warmth, pleasant winds come from the south. And when people pass into the spirit world, they travel the Milky Way's path back to the south, returning from where they came. One of the primary reasons we traveled to New Mexico was to see Chaco Canyon. I couldn't express how excited I was to be able to go there. And it was quite a journey just to get there. Similar to going to the Four Corners. We had to travel down all these different roads that some of them were dirt roads. On our way there, we stopped at a nice little location on the side of the road. A really friendly Navajo man who was making some kind of flatbread burgers, and they were delicious. They were absolutely wonderful. We enjoyed it so much, and tried. He had some corn and some other items that we purchased, and it was just like a little food truck. And we had a brief conversation, but it was pleasant. It was really nice. And so then we traveled down one road after another, and the car, even though it was four-wheel drive, it was sliding, it was moving. We had to take our time. There were grooves in the road, but with all of that said, it was worth it, because when we got to Chaco Canyon, everything opened up. And I was excited just to take in the land and the formations and see how everything was breathtaking to me. So breathtaking that I also found that my breath was taken away when I was just walking around. I don't know if it was the air quality, if it was me just being not in shape as I should be, but I noticed that the air felt thinner in a way. It didn't matter. It was gorgeous. And it felt very much like a place that I had been to before. One of the reasons why I wanted to come here is because of the wingmakers. The wingmakers have a strong connection to the ACIO. Actually, it's one and the same. The ACIO has the wingmakers as the 15th division. I know many people feel very like they want to protect the wingmakers, that they want to take ownership of the wingmakers. The wingmakers are a universal experience. That's true. But they were disclosing information for the ACIO in the earlier years prior to the 12th Division, which is with Peter the Insider, and the 6th Division, which is with myself. The Wingmakers initially broke into the public consciousness through the disclosure of the Wingmakers time capsule at the ancient Arael site near Chaco Canyon, New Mexico, an ancient Puebloan site. For years, Chaco Canyon was known for their displaying technological, organizational, and engineering feats, typically not seen at all in its time period or region. This time capsule was found to be elaborately carved into the side of the mountain with a series of chambers containing art, artifacts, poetry, philosophy, and advanced technology that doesn't seem to match the time period of when the time capsule was built. Ever since the initial discovery and disclosure of the ancient Arael site in the 90s, Much of the story surrounding the site and the wingmakers' agenda had been left shrouded in mystery. However, this did not stop it from becoming relatively well known within the truth and conspiracy communities over the years. According to Peter the Insider, the Wingmakers Project is in fact an authentic initiative that originated from the 15th Division of the ACIO, which was initially founded in 1806. As well known as the Wingmakers story had become, it really did not come close to being representative of the ACIO 15th Division agenda or the overall agenda of the entire ACIO. More accurately, it likely represented just 2% of the total initiatives that the 15th Division was involved in. That means there's so much more that they were involved in than people realize. But because people are maybe not ready to hear the other information and cling very closely to what they already know, that the information will not come out accurately or come out at all. The ACIO is largely involved in managing human interactions with extraterrestrial civilizations, as well as the procurement and regulating of the advanced technologies passing onto humanity through its development. As important as the Wingmakers time capsule was, many create the misconception that the Wingmakers initiative is reflective of the overall ACIO agenda, when in reality it only accounts for the very tiny portion of its initiatives due to the lack of previous disclosure regarding the ACIO. It was to be expected that many misconceptions about the organization would come about. One of the key findings of the Wingmakers Project is that it discloses ancient technology that can provide highly safe and precise time travel operations into the past and future. The availability of this technology to humanity is a major pivotal point, as it forms a bedrock for humanity's development into the advanced technologies.
So beautiful. Just looking around, seeing the detail, seeing the community that once was. Look at the little holes that they had for irrigation or air to come in. And just sort of exploring this whole area. Thinking about how wonderful it might have been to live here. Okay, we're going in. Yeah.
I remember many years ago, I had a recall or a dream, or I don't know if it was partial regression or vision, and how this all took place, because it was something that was completely unexpected. But the vision came in very clearly. I saw myself as a cliff dweller inside of a cliff. And I remember looking to my right and seeing who I recognized as my parents then, and I had a brother. And I thought about how happy I was. I felt safe. We had our family. There were other people that were living on this cliff with us. We lived very close to the earth, but in a higher elevation. And I felt like I was young, maybe in my teens. Something happened where both my parents ended up dying prematurely. I have no idea what the cause was. I just remember that they had died from some kind of natural death, or I don't know if it was poisoning or illness or something that had happened. I remember talking to my brother about what was going to happen next. And as I was still young, I was nervous because there was invading groups that were coming in. They were fighting. I remember seeing horses, people moving around, and kind of pillaging type of activity, warfare. And being a male, he felt it was his obligation to be involved. He was actually very excited about joining with the others, the men, to go after whatever was happening out there. And he told me to just take care of myself, and he left. I remember climbing down and trying to get the basic needs, whether it was water, food, grains, or whatever we had there, and sharing with some of the people. When someone from the tribe came, and I got pretty beat up badly, some things that happened. I feel like I died there, but for some reason I didn't. Maybe someone had nursed me back to health. It wasn't really a comfortable memory, but I remember going back inside, and at some point all of the fighting stopped. I'm not sure exactly how much time had lapsed, but I remember seeing a saucer craft outside of the cliff, and there was some kind of protocol that was initiated. And then there was these neighbors of mine that their family was fully intact. They became the leadership of our group, and, told me what needed to happen. These were of a gray species that had come, and I had a full memory of it. And we were a part of the Anasazi. Now, I heard a Navajo elder, talking about the Anasazi, and he corrected everyone and said that they came after the Pueblo, which is very possible. I definitely don't want to argue with someone else's history, and I do respect that. And he said that there was a group that was, the Anasazi were very violent or evil, and I do remember that part. So in my opinion, he was right. There were some things that were happening there that was very violent. But I also recognized that the people were good. So there was an element that was very dark there. And I remember talking to someone by the name of Dean, and he says, I traveled out in that area and I saw this image, and to me it looked like a reptilian. It was cave art or some kind of artwork that was on the rocks. He said he stumbled on it, and he said it was just right there in front of him. He and a friend had witnessed it. So immediately he thought, well, this is something that happened there. And so I see that there were the wingmakers. I see that there were also a reptilian element, a darker element. And this Navajo elder mentioned that there were sacrifices happening. And so I can concur with all of that. And I thought, and I didn't go and visit the location where I believe that I had incarnated from, or I had that experience. I believe we were all taken from the ship, and that's where this tribe disappeared. That's my opinion from my memory that I recall. So the information is something that's going to be a mystery for a lot of people. I know the way that I knew for sure that this was the location where my recall came from was I was watching, I think, a History Channel, and they actually showed an image, and I said, that's my home. I knew it immediately. I saw the way it was laid out, and it looked exactly the way I remembered it and what it felt like to be on the inside. So that's my information about the Anasazi. That is my information regarding the wingmakers, although there's more about the wingmakers that I can talk about at a later time. But for now, we decide to move on to the next destination. After going to Chaco Canyon, not everything seemed as exciting or interesting, but I think I was wrong, because just driving along the landscape, I enjoyed seeing the differences and how there started to be more natural growth, and and then you could see these mountains, and we decided to go to this place called Taos, and it's world renowned because a lot of people go there for skiing. I guess that the slopes are pretty good, and of course it gets pretty cold in the winter. There's quite a bit of snow up in those mountains. I would recommend going to this region. Even if you don't have any strong destination, you will find something along the way. There's a lot of untouched land, thanks to the local tribes around the area. They keep things very simple, something that blends in with the landscape. And it is very nice. I know that there are also a lot of other people that are there. They also appreciate it, and they keep it fairly clean, untouched. There's a lot of love in the area for what they have. There's a lot of pride for what they have. And when I say pride, they know that this is their history and they hold on to it very dearly. One of the places that we went to in Taos was a visitor center, and we met some lovely people that were First Nations people. I picked up a few items. I thought it was really nice, and had a discussion with them regarding their knowledge of the area. Some of them had homemade drums and some really, really beautiful jewelry and some other items, pieces of information. While we were at the visitor center, they told us about this place called the Earthship, because we asked if there was anything else to see locally, and they mentioned that if we wanted to go look further out, we could find some of the pueblos to look at, but we had to consider our schedule. So out of curiosity, we drove over to this place called the Earthship, and apparently it was a group of people. Kind of reminds me of like a little colony, that someone decided to create. And it looked very strange to me. I mean, we were reluctant to get out. It kind of had that feeling of, if you go in there, you might not come back out again. It's had a little bit of reflection on Jim Jones and some of these other groups. It might not be like that at all, but to me, it had a very unusual vibe. Probably they just didn't allow people to come in, and they had a very exclusive type of community. But as you can see by looking around, we drove around it and then drove around it again because we couldn't believe that something like this existed. But when you live kind of out in this not very populated areas, there are groups like this out there that make their own settlements. They're a bit off the grid. It didn't look like they had internet. I could be wrong, but I thought it was worth looking at, because these type of cultures are sometimes very involved with the New Age groups and some of these others, where they kind of go from between ashram fringe groups, and then has their own little spiritual teachings, or someone that has connections to ETs, and then they find these locations. So I thought it was really important to take a look at it, to show it, because I know sometimes people do have a hard time believing that these places exist. And sometimes even within our communities, there are people that are connected to groups like this. And so I understand that there is more out there than we realize. And with the way that the governments are being run, there might be more places like this popping up just because people do not want to deal with the systems that they're trying to create and to control humanity in so many different ways. People are trying to figure out ways to become independent. But the risks are if you get too remote and you have the wrong personalities or the right personalities, it will make a difference of which direction it goes into. It feels really important to include the region of Los Alamos in New Mexico, primarily because it was recognized as one of the development and creation places of the atomic bomb, the primary objective of the Manhattan Project by Los Alamos National Laboratory during World War II. The town is located on 4 mesas of the Pajarito Plateau and had a population of about 13,200 as of 2020. It is the county seat and one of 2 population centers in the county. The other is White Rock. The ruins of permanent Puebloan settlements, such as those located nearby in Bandelier National Monument and San Caui, the numerous other sites such as cliff dwellings, indicate that the area has been inhabited during various eras since around 1150 AD. The first settlers on the plateau were thought to be Keres, speaking Native Americans around the 10th century. Around 1300, the Tewa. The Tewa settlers immigrated from the Four Corners region and the large cities that were driven out within the 50 years by Navajo and Apache raids and by drought. In 1943, during World War II, the United States Department of War exercised eminent domain over the ranch school and all remaining homesteads in the area so that the relatively isolated location could be used for the secretive Manhattan Project, which ultimately developed the world's first nuclear weapons. Facilities for research and development were quickly built, and the scientists and engineers from all around the world were assigned to the project. However, all of the information from the town and the project was held secretly away from the public awareness. Los Alamos was referred to under the code name Site Y by military personnel and was known only as the Hill by many in the nearby Santa Fe. The specific location of the project and all of its residents were also concealed by designating its mailing address as P.O. Box 1663, Santa Fe, New Mexico. All incoming truckloads were falsely labeled as common items in order to conceal the true nature of their contents. And any outbound correspondence by those working and living in Los Alamos was censored by military officials. Not until after the bombing of Hiroshima was information about the purpose of the Manhattan Project released to the public. In the years after World War II, the laboratory was established as a research government facility under the Department of Energy and now known as Los Alamos National Laboratory. Here is the Manhattan Project. The Manhattan Project was a research and development undertaking during World War II that produced the first nuclear weapons. It was led by the United States with the support of the United Kingdom and Canada. From 1942 to 1946, the project was under the direction of Major General Leslie Groves of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. The nuclear physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer. What's interesting is they're making a big deal over him. His true name is Julius Robert Oppenheimer, and created a movie recently about him. Here is the movie that was created by Christopher Nolan. The tale of Robert J. Oppenheimer ranks among the most haunting and consequential of the modern era, yet all but its barest outlines are largely forgotten. Some are probing the magisterial Oppenheimer biography, on which the film is based on Kai Bird and Martin Sherwin's American Prometheus, published in 2005, recently hit the list of paperback bestsellers for the first time ever. And here is the book. He was the director of Los Alamos laboratory that designed the bombs. The Army component was designated as the Manhattan District, as its first headquarters were in Manhattan. The name gradually superseded the official code name development of substitute materials for the entire project. The project absorbed its earlier British counterpart, tube alloys, and the Manhattan Project began modestly in 1939. So that was the tube alloys. The project led to the development of two types of atomic bombs, both developed concurrently during the war: a relatively simple gun-type fission weapon and more complex implosion-type nuclear weapon. The Thin Man gun-type design proved impractical to use with plutonium, as a simpler gun-type design called the Little Boy was developed that used uranium-235, an isotope that makes up only 0.7% of natural uranium. And there's more here regarding what had happened. The Little Boy and the Fat Man bombs were used a month later in the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, respectively, with the Manhattan Project personnel serving as bomb assembly technicians and weaponeers on the attack aircraft. The immediate post-war years, the Manhattan Project conducted weapons testing at Bikini Atoll as part of Operation Crossroads, developed new weapons, promoted the development of the network of national laboratories, and supported the medical research into radiology, and laid the foundation for the nuclear navy. It maintained control over American atomic weapons research and production until the formation of the United States Atomic Energy Commission in January 1947. The discovery of nuclear fission by German chemists Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann in 1938, its theoretical explanation by Lisa Meitner and Otto Frisch, made the development of an atomic bomb a theoretical possibility. There were fears that German atomic bomb project would develop one first, especially among the scientists who were refugees from Nazi Germany and other fascist countries. In August of 1939, Hungarian-born physicist Leo Szilard and Eugene Wigner drafted the Einstein-Szilard letter, which warned of the potential development of extremely powerful bombs of a new type. It urged the United States to take steps to acquire stockpiles of uranium ore and accelerate the research of Enrico Fermi and others in nuclear chain reactions. They had it signed by Albert Einstein and delivered to President Franklin D. Roosevelt. Roosevelt called on Lyman Briggs of the National Bureau of Standards to head the Advisory Committee on Uranium to investigate the issues raised by the letter. Briggs had a meeting on the 21st of October 1939, which was attended by Szilard, Wigner, and Edward Teller. The committee reported back to Roosevelt in November that uranium would provide a possible source of bombs with a destructiveness vastly greater than anyone or anything now known. In 1940, the U.S. Navy awarded Columbia University $6,000 in funding, most of which Enrique Fermi and Szilard spent on purchasing graphite. A team of Columbia professors, including Fermi, Szilard, Eugene T. Booth, and John Dunning, created the first nuclear fission reaction in the Americas, verifying the work of Hahn and Strassman. And the same team subsequently built a series of prototype nuclear reactors, or piles, as Fermi called them, in Columbia, but were not yet able to achieve a chain reaction. The advisory committee in uranium became the National Defense Research Committee, the NDRC, on uranium, when that organization was formed on the 27th of June, 1940. There's a lot here. There's a lot of information if people want to read through. And probably there's a lot more beyond this one article from Wikipedia. As you can see, here's the cyclotrons that we're dealing with and their strong usage in these particle accelerators that we're seeing in the CERN type of facilities. So I could go on in reading each and every detail here, but I encourage you to do so. And I also, like I said, I find it very interesting that they are going to probably glamorize Oppenheimer through Hollywood, through the movie theaters. And meanwhile, we have a serious situation at hand and something that needs to be addressed regarding the state of the way the world is and the irrational behavior of leadership throughout the planet that is seriously considering the use of these weapons. But this was part of our trip. We didn't go into any facility, but it's something that you couldn't help but notice driving by and recognizing, and a very sombering feeling of the effect of these bombs and how damaging they are and were when they first dropped in Japan and some other regions afterwards. Even just what it does to the atmosphere, which is a huge objection from the Galactics and the ACIO and the Intergalactic Council. One of the highlights of my trip was going to Roswell. There we go. We are in Roswell. I had always thought about going there, and that and Area 51. I thought it'd be really cool just to stop by, see what it looks like, kind of feel the energy, tap into what's going on around there. I was quite amused as soon as we got into town how it was not a theme park, but it definitely had a lot of ETs, little green guys everywhere. So of course I had my green sunglasses and trying to blend in, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. So I really enjoyed it. We sort of walked around and went from store to store and looked at all sorts of different things. So this is the place we're going to be staying at. There it is. Okay, this is my bedroom. I don't know what kind of picture that is. Closet. It's weird.
Okay, so this is where we're going to eat tonight. Farley's. Looks pretty cool. Okay. So we come around here, that looks like they have their own little truck. If you can see that. Cattle Baron. Pasta Cafe. Huh. Roswell. Pretty weird. And there is the restaurant. That's it. I'll tell you how the food is when I finish.
By the way, the food at the restaurant was okay. But the interior or the atmosphere was definitely a four star or 5-star related to how interesting it was to be in there. But I remember looking around most of the time and reading the posters. There was a lot of nostalgia there. And for that reason, it was worth it. The coffee shop we went to the next day, that was really good. And I have a little bit of memorabilia from some of the stores. It was really funny because when I brought back the footage and shared it with Ralph, who's from the Netherlands, he said that it looks a little bit like Amsterdam, but without the weed. So I said, yeah, because you see all these little pictures of ETs and so forth. And there is, in fact, one of the stores, I think it was the Welcome Center of all places, that had a couple of little green guys smoking weed. So the actual crash site didn't happen in town. I did notice that there was a military school in town, and it was really prominent. You can really feel the energy there. So for a place that is considered to be based on a theme related to a hoax, it seems like there was a lot more going on than they wanted to lead up to, and actually commercialized it, turned it into this cartoonish type of location. Underneath it all, there was definitely some type of security, and very likely a lot more hidden. What I did find out is the crash site happened miles away, which leads me up to another situation that occurred. And that was when we were traveling down to Roswell, we actually went through it. And I know that we went through it. We calculated the mileage and the location of how we drove. And during, or approximately around that time, we had the weirdest looking cloud hovered over us for miles. And it was dark. It looked like some kind of weird storm cloud. If someone asked me, well, was it saucer shaped? Yes, it was. It was. Am I saying it was a craft? I'm not necessarily saying that, but it was definitely something. And I did pick up an energy that felt very much like androids, of all things. Not necessarily ETs. But I guess that's my expression, my experience. The energy was a little weird. I remember sleeping there that night and feeling like I'm not sure if I can sleep. Not necessarily because of that I was afraid, but it was more like a frequency, like a scalar type of energy there, particularly around the hotel that we stayed in. And as you can see, the hotel wasn't necessarily a high-end hotel, but there was without a doubt a frequency sound there. It felt like everything was bouncing off the walls. You know, where you see that you walk down and the motel is on one side and then the another part of it is on another where there's parking. And there was also, I think, some kind of sirens and some noise that happened at night. and it was pretty loud, and there wasn't a lot of insulation on the inside, so you could hear what was going on outside. It was weird. It was a little bit weird. I enjoyed it tremendously. I would actually do it again. I'd go there again, and I'd take it in. But I think on a more serious note, I do believe that a crash happened, and I do believe that a crash has happened in more than one location, not just one. Because where I live, there was also another incident. It was called the incident in Exeter, but we'll talk about that at another time. So let's take a look at what happened at Roswell, or what they say didn't happen at Roswell. Here's some basic information about Roswell in New Mexico. In 1947, debris recovery from this Roswell incident. They also talk about the TV show that happened, that they created. It was a TV series, which is very interesting. I did watch that. Here's information regarding the Roswell incident, that it was in 1947, a recovery of metallic and rubber debris from the military balloon by Roswell Army Airfield personnel, who issued a press release announcing possession of a flying disc. Decades later, conspiracy theories claimed that the debris from an alien spaceship had been recovered or covered up by the government. In response, in 1994, the United States Air Force published a report concluding the crashed object was a top-secret nuclear test surveillance balloon from Project Mogul. So we can take a look at Project Mogul. That was a top-secret project from the U.S. Army Air Force involving microphones flown in high-altitude balloons, whose primary purpose was the long-distance detection of sound waves generated by Soviet atomic bomb tests. The project was carried out from 1947 until 1949, a portion of an unclassified project by New York University atmospheric researchers, and the project was moderately successful but was expensive and superseded by a network of seismic detectors and air sampling for fallout, which was cheaper, more reliable, and easier to deploy and operate. The thing that I just want to bring up is, why did I come back here, even though it looks like I'm veering off of the topic? I'm not really, because anytime that there is experimentation and anything nuclear related, it's a high possibility that there will be ET activity in that space. Returning back to this article, the Roswell incident took place during the flying disc craze of 1947, sparked by widespread media coverage of pilot Kenneth Arnold's alleged sighting. Amid hundreds of reports nationwide, in July 8th of 1947, Roswell Army Airfield press release was broadcast via wire transmission. The Army quickly retracted the release, falsely stating the crashed object was merely a conventional weather balloon. We see later on that the incident was forgotten until 1978, when retired Lieutenant Colonel Jesse Marcel was interviewed by ufologist Stanton Friedman. By the way, Stanton Friedman's no longer with us, and he passed away not long ago. In that interview, Marcel revealed the weather balloon had been a cover story to divert the public attention. Based on this, Marcel speculated the debris might have been extraterrestrial in origin. Jesse Marcel's interview led to complex conspiracy theories about alien spacecraft recovery and military cover-ups by ufologists. In 1979, over 3 decades after Roswell, conspiracy theorists began to claim that extraterrestrial occupants had been recovered by the military at Roswell. In response to claims of alien occupants, a second USAF report in 1997 reviewed testimonies about aliens and found them to be baseless, made up, and inspired by parachute dummies. So it just keeps on going on how they cover or embellish conspiracy theories Of course, about the event persists despite explanations linking the incident to Project Mogul, a military balloon, or having been described as the world's most famous and most exhaustively investigated and most thoroughly debunked UFO claim. Its myth has become a cultural phenomenon in the Roswell incident, continues to be of interest in popular media. Portrayals of the incidents are prominent, enduring trope in popular culture and associated with gray aliens and flying saucers. And so then they say that the city of Roswell has embraced the iconography, featuring a little green man on its seal and hosting numerous UFO attractions and events. Here we come down to the reference to the Cold War, which keeps coming up in so many different ways. And so once again, we go back to this Cold War incident, that all these other little things that are happening around it, and this being one of them, calling this the atomic age. They've tracked the Flight 4 flying northeast toward Corona and lost contact within 17 miles. So, and this activity that they said was balloons was tracked to Corona, New Mexico. So this was the region that we were in. We traveled down, and that's where we had that heavy cloud that was over us, and then we arrived in Roswell. And that was where we stayed overnight. Here's an interesting point. Many of these accounts echoed Arnold's description with speed beyond known planes and elements from aircraft like glass domes, cockpits, fins, legs, jet pipes, vapor trails, and even propellers. On July 4th, 1947, the United Airlines Flight 105 reported seeing multiple flying discs. During that summer, Americans associated saucers with secret military projects, hoaxes, or a natural phenomenon. They had not yet become synonymous with the idea of extraterrestrial visitation. I believe it happened. A lot of people don't. A lot of people do. I guess it's from what perspective that you're coming from. And I did meet Stanton Friedman. He seemed to be a legitimate individual who did his research and provided intel regarding not only this incident but others. And I still question what happened to him and why he passed. He seemed to be somewhat healthy, but I had spoken to him more than once. I don't think that something like this should be ignored. I know that the government doesn't want to talk about it, and it may be another 50 years or so before they discuss anything like this. But as I remember coming into the town, I noticed it felt like a military presence, but according to what they say, there was not a military base there, but it was a military school. So let's talk about Walker Air Force Base. It is closed. The Air Force Base in Roswell, that was about 3 miles south of the central business district of Roswell in New Mexico. It was opened in 1941 as an Army Air Corps flying school and was active during World War II and the post-war as a Roswell Army Airfield. During the early years of the Cold War, it became the largest base of Strategic Air Command, and it is also known for the Roswell UFO incident, an event that occurred in 4th of July, 1947. It is an interesting date. It is alleged that the flying disc crashed during a severe thunderstorm near the base of Corona, New Mexico. Walker Air Force Base was named after General Kenneth Newton Walker. What became of Roswell Army Airfield? It was acquired by the United States Army Air Forces in 1941 from rancher David Chesser for the purpose of establishing a military flying training center and a bombardier school. From the beginning, it was designed as a large, expansive facility given the excellent flying weather in New Mexico. The airfield consisted of 7 concrete runways, 2 parallel, north-south. In addition, no fewer than 9 auxiliary landing fields for overflow and touch-and-go landing takeoffs established in the area. And let's take a look at when it was in use, all the way until 1967. I don't think it was an accident that they moved it. I think that, some people have hinted to me that they actually saw some of the debris in a hangar in Texas. I've heard a lot of different things, but I don't question it whatsoever. And I hope people do their research, make their own decision. So here is an article from the New York Times. It's entitled, "In Roswell, New Mexico, Closing of Air Base Wasn't the End." They talk about Roswell, New Mexico from World War II until 3 years ago. The Air Force Base was Roswell's biggest cash crop then. With little warning, there was a blight. In June 30th, 1967, Walker Air Force Base, a strategic air command bomber center, was closed, and the impact was devastating. January 1st that year, the following June 30th, Roswell lost 7,000 of its 39,000 residents, and about 4,000 homes went on the market. 700 more were left empty on the base. College graduates took flight to California, Colorado, and many stores and businesses closed. So as you scroll down to see what was going on, you come up to here. Before the Second World War, Roswell was a sleepy little desert town where cattle and sheep ranchers sold their products. It had some oil and gas, but it was not an oil town. And then it says dropped atomic bombs. During World War II, the Air Force built a bomber base about 10 miles south of Roswell. The B-29s that dropped the atomic bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, the Enola Gay and the Great Artiste, came from this base. The air base was kept open after the war, and its main runway was extended 13,000 feet. The Air Force assured the city leaders that the base, renamed the Walker Air Force Base after the war, was one of the most important fields in the Strategic Air Command. I thought that part was very interesting, that this was actually the location, which also lends the idea of what I said earlier. The reason why ETs show up is when there is nuclear activity. So they were creating nuclear bombs from this region, or launching them from this region, which is a good reason why they would show up afterwards. There is a reason why the military doesn't want to reveal when this type of activity happens. There was the hot air balloons that are showing up in different places that, we were saying they were from China recently. There could be a lot of different things. And I'll tell you, I get so many pictures and video from different people of ET activity in the sky, or advanced technology, reversed engineered vehicles. And nobody wants to talk about it. And if you do, everyone comes in. There's a whole bunch of people that are really quick to debunk everything. It's almost like you're looking for an argument or a fight. At this point, they've gotten the masses to fight for them. The government wants it to be hush-hush. Maybe even the world does. Nobody wants to discuss the topic. Prior to the 60s, there were records, information in newspaper articles disclosing that there was ET activity, sightings, and then it got to a point where they would mock the public if they would provide anything. So now they're under the category of conspiracy theorists, which is, you could see in Wikipedia, it's all over the place. Anyone that believes in anything of this nature has a conspiracy attached to their thinking and even categorizing them as someone that's not mentally balanced. It's, denying what we're actually seeing. We have to be strong in our beliefs, but also know when to provide that information, when not. And there will be a time when they're just not going to be able to hide it anymore. Or if it works for their agenda, then they will present it to the public. I know that they don't want people to be frightened, to act radically, to be paranoid, to start going after people that they suspect are different. I do believe that they're living amongst us, and they have been all along. But that's my belief system. And I think many of you do agree. There are some that don't, and that's fine as well. As I said, it's up to each individual to do their own research on this topic. And if you don't, then, ignoring it doesn't mean it will go away. So let's go on to our next trip. On our travel back from Roswell, and our destiny was to go to Tombstone, heading back to the location of where we started, and this is in Arizona, but we noticed these beautiful white sands. And I started looking at it and wondering where they came from. It seemed really out of place. And so it's in the state of New Mexico. And here is the White Sands missile range. So it's military testing area and firing range located in the U.S. state of New Mexico. The range was originally established as a White Sands Proving Ground in the 9th of July in 1945. This is the first atomic bomb, codenamed Trinity, was test detonated at Trinity site near the northern boundary of the range on 16th of July 1945, 7 days after the White Sands Proving Ground was established. After the conclusion of World War II, 100 long-range German V-2 rockets that were captured by U.S. military troops were brought to White Sands Missile Range. Of these, 67 were test fired between 1946 and 1951 from the White Sands V-2 launching site. This was followed by the testing of American rockets, which continue to this day, along the testing other technologies. NASA's Space Shuttle Columbia landed on the Northrop Strip in WSMR on the 30th of March 1982 as a conclusion to mission STS-3. This was the only time that NASA used the White Sands Missile Range as a landing site for the space shuttle. On the 15th of May in 1947, a V-2 rocket fired with the WSMR veered off course and landed 4 miles, about 6.4 kilometers northeast of Alamogordo, New Mexico. Exactly 2 weeks later, on May 29th, a modified V-2 sounding rocket veered off course and crashed on top of a rocky knoll about 3.5 miles, the south of Juarez Business District. On the 11th of July 1970, the United States Air Force launched an Athena sounding rocket equipped for re-entry vehicle V-123-D from the Green River Launch Complex in Utah, while its intended target was inside the White Sands Missile Range. The rocket instead flew south and impacted 180 to 200 miles south of the Mexican border in the Mapimi Desert in the northeastern corner of the Mexican state of Durango. This area encompasses almost 3,200 square miles, and including the parts of Doña Ana, Otero, Socorro, Sierra, and Lincoln counties in southern New Mexico. It's an impressive sight. I mean, you're driving by there and you just see all this beautiful white. And it looks like it has been there for a long time. So if I go back to the park, It says approximately 12,000 years ago, the land within the Tularosa Basin featured large lakes, streams, grasslands, and ice age mammals. As the climate warmed, rain and snow melt dissolved gypsum from the surrounding mountains and carried it into the basin. Further warming and drying caused the lakes to evaporate and form selenite crystals. Strong winds then broke up crystals and transported them eastward. A similar process continues to produce gypsum sand today. Thousands of species of animals inhabit the park, a large portion of which are invertebrates. Several animal species featuring white or off-white coloration, and at least 45 species are endemic, living only in this park, with 40 of them being moth species. The Tularosa Basin has also seen a number of human inhabitants, from Paleo-Indians 12,000 years ago to modern farmers, ranchers, and miners. The White Sands National Park was originally designated White Sands National Monument in January of 1933 by President Herbert Hoover. It was redesigned as a national park by Congress and signed into law by President Donald Trump in December of 2019. It is the most visited site in New Mexico, with about 600,000 visitors each year. The park features a drive from the visitor center to the heart of the dunes, picnic areas, and so forth. I'm not sure if it sounds really safe to me, considering that they've used it as a test site and there are all of these people going there to visit. It's just something to think about. It is very beautiful, and it does kind of draw you in. You really want to go over there and walk on it. There's more information about it in Wikipedia and other sites and locations. And here is the National Park Service. Maybe they bring you to a safer location, but you notice on this website from the National Park Service, the White Sands National Park in New Mexico, there is road closed, missile test in progress. Inquire at the visitor center. That's interesting. As I said, it wasn't a location that we stopped at. I would definitely recommend that people, make a decision of whether or not they really want to go there. But you can look at it. Some people might object and say there's nothing wrong with going there. But I know what radiation does, and you find out later in your life that you have health issues. So that's not something that you want to go through. So after a long trip, we drove into Tombstone, and we were finally back in Arizona again. And we had a reservation at a certain hotel, and that didn't work out so well. So we ended up going to another hotel, and that was closer to the downtown area where we wanted to be in the first place. And it all worked out perfectly. Here are some pictures that I had inside my room that reflects some of the old movies, old Western movies. Here's another one. And another picture of the famous movie called Tombstone, where you see the four riders, the four cowboys that everyone knows about. It's Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp. And so it's played by Val Kilmer and Kurt Russell and Sam Elliott. And it was, really good Western. If you're really into Westerns, it's a great place to start. And it kind of, has that saying, I'm your huckleberry. And kind of like little terms that I think are associated with the actors and the history of who they were at that time in the old Western kind of, I won't call them cities, more like little towns. So here is the downtown area. We actually went there at night. I had my cowboy hat, I had my cowboy boots, and I was ready to go. I mean, I had everything that I needed to fit in, and we had fun. We went and got something to eat, and then It was really strange. Other people walking in with cowboy hats on. You really feel like, that it was very immersive, and you stepped right into another time period, except for, there weren't any horses out there. You see these old cars. So it was a little older, but, you do have this feeling of the Old West. And another place that we went to, there were, saloon girls and, some guy singing, and it was old Western types of songs. It was just a lot of fun, and I would recommend it for anyone who wants to just forget about the way our civilization is right now and get right into an older style of living without, actually being in danger, because in those days you would have been in danger. The way people handled guns, and it was lawless, and people did whatever they felt like doing, and you didn't want to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. But for us, it was fairly safe. It was kind of an escape from everything else. And after the heavy and intense view of some of the other locations we went to in New Mexico and the earlier part of Arizona, it was a nice way to kind of close the trip. So we sort of walked around, took in all the scenery, and as you can see, there weren't a whole lot of people around, so we had the town to ourselves in some way. There were people walking around, but we got there nice and early, and we took a little carriage ride around and looked at all the little shops. Of course, it's very touristy, but it was fun. It was so much fun just to walk around and see what they had. You can see that, they had little gun shops and all sorts of different things that you wouldn't see out east, that's for sure. Here's another view of how they perceived politicians, also lawyers, by the way. And just like usually a little warning that you get when you enter into a town like this. Here's something else interesting that relates more to our present day circumstances that we're dealing with, the cabal, and I just couldn't resist. I had to take a picture of this. And it's absolutely beautiful. You're looking out at the mountains in the background, and it was really a great day. There was a standoff in the middle, and you see the guys all lined up over by the OK Corral. So they were all representing that picture that I showed earlier that was in my bedroom at the hotel. It's kind of fun. Everyone's in character. They're walking around. And sort of like that little cowboy show that we saw when we went into Williams, Arizona, before we went over to the Grand Canyon. We had a cup of coffee at the OK Cafe, and I thought this was amusing. Madame Mustache reminded me of some of the girls there. And a historical location where some of these people got killed. Buckskin Frank Leslie killed Billy Claiborne here on November 14th, 1882. And Luke Short killed Charlie Storms here on February 25th, 1881. I'm sure a whole lot more got killed on that street. That very street. It hasn't changed. And that's what's really great. It's like locked in time. Cowboys leave your guns at the bar, and there's a saloon. Go in and have a drink, leave your guns at the bar, have a burger or a steak or french fries or whatever it is that you like. If you're vegetarian, you have whatever you want. They had some salads and other good things there, and like I said, some live entertainment, lots of fun, people dressed in character. It was a great escape. It was a great way to kind of get away from things. But on another note, I have been told that at night, people have said that they have heard men walking down the street, and it sounded like they had on boots and spurs, but no one's there. And I've heard this from more than one person, multiple people, because they say that the town is haunted and weird things happen at night. And I will say that night that we were there, it did get a little weird. We felt a little tension. There was misunderstandings or a lack of clarity in our conversations. And then the next day, everything was okay again. So I do wonder, do the ghosts speak in some of these locations? You don't change anything, and they seem to find that it's familiar to them, and they walk up and down the streets. But I would highly recommend it. And that was the close of our trip. That's the end of what we had to do. On the way back, we stayed at one more hotel around Phoenix. And that was not really as pleasant. There was a lot of noise. Some guy was fighting with his wife and was playing loud music in his car outside of the hotel for hours. I also had a bedroom that had some kind of, looked like a glow marker was on the wall, and they created a weird looking smiley face. And so when you shut off the lights, you can see it. So it was a little strange towards the end. I felt like the energies, some were happy that we were there, some were not happy. But that happens where there is a combination of all sorts of realities combined. I don't know any other way to say it. You have extreme groups of people, early settlers, indigenous people, and ETs. So something's bound to happen. Oh, and on a positive note, the airport did find my phone.